in the conference room at BASRA. Bo Burns, who made a large donation to start headquarters, and Ben Astorita, the first Commodore. Charlie Badeau, radio operator and underwater pioneer, and Dr. Norman Cove, who was the first Vice Commodore. In 1964-65, the auxiliary had 3 duty teams, 30 volunteer boats, 7 volunteer aircraft, and a dive unit. It averaged 12 cases a year. Today, there are 6 duty teams, and BASRA has its own fleet, and there are branches in Grand Bahama and Abaco, with many volunteers additionally throughout the Bahamas. The United States Coast Guard has proved to be the auxiliary's greatest ally. The U.S. Coast Guard sent an officer to Nassau to give Ben Astorita a crash course in search and rescue, along with rescue manuals, etc. The officer stayed during our teething stage until we were better organized. In our early days, most of the distress calls came through the telecommunications marine operator, now defunct. A great asset to the organization was the establishment of an answering service at the police headquarters and in the radio room, and they still, to this day, answer the phone for BASRA and have the person who's on duty name and number each night with them. As time passed, the government gave the auxiliary a lease of the old Pan American ramp area. That's another historical talk if we can. The drive for funds to build a BASRA headquarters was kicked off by Uncle Bo Burns, a visiting yachtsman. The public gave generously, and the new building was opened by the Prime Minister at the time, Sir Lyndon Pinling, on May the 5th, 1970. An 18-foot outboard boat given to us by OMI was replaced by a 17-foot Monarch Boston whaler donated by Moore's Marine. That in turn was succeeded by a Bertram donated by the combined Rotary Clubs of Nassau. In 1970, the auxiliary was incorporated and the name was changed to Bahamas Air Sea Rescue Association. BASRA continued to help people in distress, and Grand Bahama and Abaco became BASRA divisions. Eventually, BASRA Freeport became self-sufficient. During the early 70s, BASRA received a 16-foot inflatable boat, an Avon, as an inshore vessel. This boat was Captain John Fisk's pride and joy, and he looked after it like his child. We also had a major fundraising drive headed by Russell Cairns for updated communications equipment, and many friends donated to this cause. In 1983, BASRA received a donation of a 17-foot aluminum boat as another inshore rescue boat from the American Embassy in Nassau. In 1985, BASRA purchased a 38-foot self-righting lock-in rollover vessel built in England. This was shipped to Nassau on a British Navy supply vessel, the Rover, courtesy of the then British High Commissioner. This vessel was named the Lady Pearl, after long-time BASRA Control Officer Pearl Waiton. BASRA's faithful friends gave many donations to help pay for this vessel. As a result of this support received from the public, the Lady Pearl was paid for within 2 years of being put into service on May the 17th, 1985. In 1985, BASRA purchased in mid-89, BASRA placed an order for a 25-foot Boston whaler Sentry. This boat cost approximately $60,000 and began operation in December. The Sentry was named Uncle Ben after one of the founders and Commodore for life, Ben Astorita. Thanks to the government, we received duty exemptions on both the lock-in and the Sentry. BASRA was able to install repeater stations in several of the family islands. These would relay on the VHF distress calls, and the Royal Bahamas Defense Force monitored the repeaters in their radio control room. They're since now defunct. And then the Bahamas Billfish Championship Committee donated several $1,000s that allowed BASRA to improve the communications at headquarters. In 1997, Ben Astorita passed away, and an Uncle Ben Award Fund / Safe Boating Fund was started to train youths in boat safety and seamanship. The 14-foot rigid inflatable boat was donated to BASRA for this youth training. On the youth training, it's I'll get to it a little bit later, but it died a little bit when we found out from the insurance that we were not covered for anyone under 16 or over 72 out on the vessels and using the property. Paul? The air pilots of the Nassau Flying Club originally acted as our air wing, and I'd like to invite Captain Paul Aroner, who flew many times to BASRA, to just talk a little bit about the air wing.
Thank you, Chris. The air wing sounds like a very well-organized, The air wing sounds like a very well-organized entity. In the early days, it was anything but organized, but it functioned, and it functioned well. Basically, it was the pilots of the Nassau Flying Club, which in those days was based at Oaks Field. And one of the anomalies of BASRA, they didn't search for missing airplanes. They only searched for boats. So if one of their air wing had gone down on a private mission and they were not associated with BASRA, technically BASRA would not have gone out to look for them. That has since been changed. There were a very keen group of pilots at the Nassau Flying Club who I think relished every time a boat was in trouble and they got the opportunity to go out and look for it. Some of them were, like myself, were professional pilots. Most of them were just strictly private pilots who had an airplane of their own, who had access to a friend's airplane, and on very short notice they would drop what they were doing, head to Oaks Field and join the search. Now, even today, when you're flying around the Out Islands, the minute you get away from Nassau, airplanes are virtually out of communications with the world. There's nobody. Keep reminding me to hold on. Airplanes basically operate on very high frequency radios. And the very high frequency radio at an altitude of 10,000 feet, 5,000 feet, sorry, has a range of 100 miles. At an altitude of about 100 feet where you're out searching for boats, you have a range of about 10 miles, so there's nobody to talk to. Coordinating with the search and rescue headquarters was always a problem. But this did not faze the pilots. They were happy to go out there and look. I did quite a few searches. I couldn't tell you how many. Some of them were very routine. Others were a little bit more exciting. Many of you probably know Mike Miolis. Mike Miolis is one of the Greek families here in Nassau. And Mike flew regularly on Bahamas Airways, back and forth to Miami. And Mike was terrified of flying. You had to fortify Mike before the flight and during the flight just to get him on that airplane. One Monday morning, I was not even out of bed and the phone rang. It was Mike Miolis. He says, "Paul, my brother is missing. He went fishing yesterday and didn't come back. I want you to get an airplane and take me out to look for him." Now, the last thing I wanted to do was take Mike Miolis out on a search. So I said, "Mike, let me check into this." So I called BASRA and they said, "No problem, Paul. We've already got airplanes out there looking for him." So I called Mike and said, "Don't worry, Mike, BASRA's on the job." He said, No, that's not good enough. I want to go out and look for my brother. I don't talk to him, but he's my brother. I want to find him. So I borrowed an airplane actually from Leonard Chiertow. And Mike and I met at Oaks Field, and we took off and we went looking. And I've never had a better observer than Mike Miolis. He was totally fearless.